So welcome to this advanced session, the patterns for creating robust enterprise application with Power Automate. So if you want, you can watch previous session I've done for Ignite, 2 sessions, and also more recently, a session on Common Data Service for the Business Application Summit. So I'm Dr. Flo. I'm also known as Serge Luca, an MVP in Office 365 and in business application. I'm based in Brussels. I'm also the author of Power Automate in a Day, material for Microsoft. And by the way, there will be a new version of Power Automate in a Day next week with new lab, new editor, new stuff. And let's start from the beginning. So if you want, actually, in this session, I'm going to share my experience based on many projects or enterprise project with both Power Automate and Power Apps. And the first thing when you start working for a customer with these tools is first make IT happy. Not just for the Power Platform, of course, but that means that you need to talk first about the Power Platform governance. And by governance, I mean that you need to make sure that people understand the platform. So spend a lot of time into explaining what the platform is, the different features. Also, licensing is very confusing. So talk a lot about licensing. Also explain how you can secure the platform, because if you cannot explain that, you won't be able to start working on it. So the security will block you, right? So, and believe me, I've suffered a lot from the security department. So secure the platform. And recently there was a new feature introduced by the Power Platform team, which is now you can block a connector. That is very important. You can just go to the administration center, Power Platform Administration Center, and you have this feature called block. So you can block, for instance, non-Microsoft connectors, which is one of the first rule you need to put in place. Not all connectors can be blocked, but many can be blocked, right? So secure the platform, monitor the platform. So explain how you can monitor the platform, or you can put an alert system in place. So these last 3 steps are a way to reduce the risk of introducing the Power Platform, and also, of course, Power Automate. And then if you want to target citizen development, we won't cover a lot of citizen development in this session, but you can start nurturing a community. So make sure that the community of citizen developer can grow up in an organic way. Also, you need to put in place a way to support people. So providing some help, helping the help desk, integrating the things with operation, for instance. And most of these steps are covered by a free product that you can download, which is the COE, Center of Excellence, a very nice tool that you can download from GitHub, among others. Okay, so that's important if you want to start working with the Power Platform, including Power Automate. Also, make sure that you understand the position of Power Automate in the architecture. I will talk a bit more about that. That's what I call the power architecture. When you work with the business, and usually with the Power Platform, you work more with the business, you can iterate fast, but don't forget to talk to IT, otherwise you can have a lot of troubles. Application lifecycle is still very weak in the Power Platform. I will provide you with more details about this. Licensing is very confusing. Make sure IT fully understand that. Put an environment policy in place. That's very important. The DLP policy is also super important. Don't do anything before having a DLP policy. COE provide monitoring and support as well. So what I meant by power architecture is this. It's a way to explain the positioning of, in this case, Power Automate in the Power Platform. You have storage layer. In the storage layer, you can have SharePoint list, document libraries, SQL, analysis service, or the common data service. Common data service is very great. On top of that, you have the business layer, and that's where Flow or Power Automate is. So you will create flows. That's basically the business layer. A bit more than that, of course. On top of that, we have the UI layer, where we have Microsoft Teams, SharePoint Forms, Power Apps Canvas, Power Apps Model-Driven Apps, Power Apps Portal, perhaps a Power Virtual Agent. And on top of that, we have what I call an analytics layer, where we can have Power BI and perhaps AI Builder. Okay, so that's my view of the different layers of the Power Platform. And now we can have also a logging layer. Your application must be able to log information somewhere. For instance, a very nice tool for managing the logging is Azure Application Insight, which requires some premium license. And that's the communication between the different layers. So the UI layer, so basically Power Apps and more, will usually talk to Flow to communicate with the storage layer, especially for updating or adding new information in the backend. Power BI or the analytics layer will directly communicate, of course, with the storage layer. And sometimes the UI layer can directly communicate with the storage layer. Sometimes if you want to read information stored in, for instance, SharePoint or CDS, you can directly bind your Power Apps application to the storage layer, even though this can generate some scalability issue. Okay, so this area here in red on the picture required the common data service. So also Flow will usually be used to send information to Azure Application Insight for the logging, for the telemetry. But now we have a new features in Power Apps that allow you to directly send information to Azure Application Insight. If you want to know more about this, I will share a blog post that illustrates how you can do that here. That's very, very nice. Providing telemetry to your Power Apps. So
Serge,
also,
one
yes.
thing. Can you please minimize your Teams window
yes.
at the right?
Sorry. Yes. Thank you.
People were
Thank you.
complaining that they couldn't see your full logo, so
Oh, they want to see my logo. Okay,
yeah.
I will share a big version of my logo.
Okay, go on. Sorry for that.
Yeah. So you need to make IT happy because you need environment. So IT will give you environment. And also they need to provide you with a maker and a service account. And they must authorize you in the DLP policy, right? So, and then you will give them your package, your zip file, or even better now, your solution. I will get back to the solution discussion later. And then the love story can start between IT and yourself, and maybe the business as well. ILM story is a bit a problem in the Power Platform. It's quite weak. What I usually do is this. For every developer, I have an environment. Well, I have one environment for each developer. I call that local dev. Okay, that means usually for these developers, I use the community license, which give you premium for free. The problem with the community license is you cannot share, for instance, Flow with other developers, but then they can start working on their own. They can creating their own solution. But then for each department and each service, I create a dedicated environment. So I have a dev environment, development environment, a test UAT environment, and a production environment. And of course, the deployment start from dev to test to production, right? So but usually the good practice, at least my practice, is to have one environment for each department. So that means in this case, 3 environments for the department because you have dev, test, and prod. Okay. I usually call that dev as shared dev because this is a local dev, and shared dev, that's where we consolidate all the information. If you want continuous integration, then you need to rely on Azure DevOps. So quick demo on ALM. I will switch to AVM, which is, so my recommendation is no, when you start creating a flow, start it from a solution because there are many connectors that are only available in solution. Many, and more than many, right? So everything is in solution in my case. And for instance, in my solution, I define environment variable. So if I have to make a connection to, for instance, a SharePoint list or SharePoint site, the location, so the list GUID or the site URL or the list GUID is stored in variable here as JSON. I will get back to the JSON. But in my flow, what I do is this. Let's say you can work as we did before, which is let's say you connect to a SharePoint site, you hardcode the SharePoint site URL, the list name here. That means internally the system will use a list GUID, right? If let's say you use Excel, you want to connect to Excel, you provide the list and then the GUID and then the file and then the table. Behind all these things, there is a GUID which is generated. So when you want to deploy that to another environment, from dev to test to prod, then it's a nightmare when you have many connection, many action connecting to SharePoint. So the good practice is to define things in environment variable. Let me show you that. So I can put these things, this, you see, site URL, my list, GUID, etc., in environment variable. So environment variable like this. Okay, here in the solution. That's my JSON. And the flow will read this information. So the flow, let's go to the flow here. The flow will call a child flow that will retrieve the environment variable value from the solution here, right? And it will feed an object called params, where there's a schema which will provide dynamic value. So in my flow, I will just connect to the dynamic value. So here, address is connected to site URL, property of params. You see, so list name is actually a GUID, is connected to the ALM list dynamic property of params. So that if I have to move from another environment, I just change one thing, the environment variable, and it's moved. Okay, so that works very well. If you don't do that, you're gonna face a nightmare. So that was a light URL, a light ALM. Make your code maintainable, of course. That means you need to document and comment your code. You need to use a lot of scope. You need to reuse code. So there are different type of reusability patterns that I will explain. Filter early so that you don't have to use a lot of condition in your code. Use select statement and provide a naming convention. And of course, follow the naming conventions. Now let's go to the demo. How can you make your code maintainable? And here, this is an example of flow, which is quite well written. I always have an action called documentation where I describe what the flow does. And I always have a try and a catch. That's for managing the errors. I will get back later to managing errors. I have an init scope where I initialize my variable. Unfortunately, you cannot initialize compose in the scope, not yet, at least. And in my scope, I use subscope. So just by reading the scope name, you should understand what the flow does. Okay. And of course, here, if I take a look at my code, I put a lot of comments everywhere. The naming convention, well, let's go here. That's not a good example. Communication. Yeah, so same documentation here. I usually keep the action name here, for instance, send an email and dash something else. So this is not a good example, but I don't change the action name. Otherwise, you don't know which action was used, right? So make your code maintainable. That's very important. And actually, that's very easy to do. Make your code fast and scalable. Usually, flow doesn't need to be fast. However, sometimes you need some performance, especially when flow is called from a UI like Power Apps. So how can you make your code running fast? Minimize usage of variable, use compose. So compose is faster than variable. Minimize usage of loops. Loops are very slow. Use concurrency. I will illustrate what I mean by concurrency. Use batch when you can. Filter on the server first. Don't filter in flow because then it's a bit slower. And use the filter action because the filter action is very fast. Let's go to the demo. And code running fast here. Okay, example. This flow return information from a SharePoint list, and we'll try to retrieve all the expense that have been rejected. So of course, the first reflex, and that's what usually citizen developers do, is to return everything, to have an apply to each, and in the apply to each, to have a condition that check if the status of the expense is rejected, and then they will store that into an array. Okay, but this can be very, very slow. So to improve that, one way is to use the filter array action, which, I don't know how they do that, run very fast in flow. Of course, the get item will return everything, but filter array will be way, way, way faster than apply to each. Okay. Of course, the best option is to filter on the server. So here, for instance, in this SharePoint action, you have, and not just in the SharePoint action, in most action in Power Automate, you have a filter query option where you can specify an OData instruction. And this means that the filter will happen in the data source and not in the flow. Okay. Also, concurrency, I mentioned concurrency. Example, slow code, you do everything sequentially. Fast code, the same thing, but in parallel. Okay. I mean, it's very easy to perform, right? Good. Manage error. Anytime you create a flow, you need to start managing error from scratch. But you can also minimize errors. Use question mark. Don't forget question mark. Normally, you should never have code without question mark. Okay. Coalesce, because some operator or some function in flow don't support null value, like switch, for instance. They crash. Always log errors locally in such a way that user of your flow, so basically the business, can have a look at what's going on, but also log centrally, because IT need to know that some code, some flow manage errors. So you need to centralize that as well. I will show you how to do that. So let's go to the demo. And here, let's get there. Here, manage error. So anytime I create a flow, I write this, try and catch, and then the catch will run after the try if there is an error. Okay, that's the first thing you're supposed to do. And then, of course, in the catch, what I do is I try to find every error. So here I have a compose with, I use a function called result, where I will analyze the try block, and result will go to true. Here I will filter all the action in the try that are in error state. So I have an apply to each that do that, and I will store that in a place, and a place like a SharePoint list. But of course, when there is an error, I will also send this information to a central place for IT, which is Azure Application Insight. So then you need to use a premium connector. In this case, I use the HTTP connector. I think we might have a Azure Application Insight connection now by now. I think it could be possible. But anyway, I send that to Azure Application Insight. So it's centralized for the IT. Okay. So this slide illustrates Azure Application Insight. So you can provide a lot of information, a lot of telemetry to your application. Also, when your flow generates an error, the error will be logged into the analytics. So user, well, not user, but the IT can go to the platform administration center, analyze the analytics for Power Automate, and then they can trace all the flow that generate a lot of errors. Okay, so that is important in your flow. And I would like to get back to the demo. In your flow, that if you have an error, don't forget to provide, for instance, a terminate with an error code, a fail status, right? If you don't put the fail status, the flow won't show up in this analytics log. Okay. Let's get back to the slide. And yeah, this blog post illustrates the telemetry for Power Apps. Okay, so how to send information from Power Apps to Azure Application Insight. You can apply that, of course, to Power Automate. Know the limitation. Anytime you use a system, you need to know the limitation, and the limitation change. We still have the 30 days limitation. A flow cannot run for more than 30 days. If you want to go beyond 30 days, you can follow a pattern, which is a controller pattern that I've proposed 2 years ago. I will quickly explain what it is. Flow approval duration, 30 days. If you want to go beyond 30 days, you can use the CDS trigger when a record is updated, which is premium, or use the controller pattern. Also, 500 action per flow. I think that's the maximum now. If you want more, you can raise a ticket, or better, create nested flow. A flow can call a child flow. Loops, still limited to 5,000 iteration in do until, 5,000 in apply to each. If you have premium, you can have up to 100,000. It's very important to know. You cannot cancel a flow automatically. So if you have a flow approval, for instance, you cannot cancel it automatically by code. You can go to CDS and update the status. But if the flow is still waiting for the approval, it will still waiting indefinitely, right? So you cannot bypass that. So if you want bypass, you have to apply the controller pattern. Or you can, and that's what I've recently done, you can create your own approval system. No state machine. If you want state machine, again, controller pattern. The application lifecycle management and DevOps story is quite weak. But you can, if you want to have continuous integration, you can use the Power Platform Azure DevOps component. Or of course, you can export your solution or unzip and rezip. You can not resume a flow. So if a flow crash for some reason somewhere, you cannot restart from where it crashed. However, this is in the roadmap, so this will be fixed in the future. There is a limitation in the number of actions that the flow can do. We call that API call limitation. You don't have errors, just the flow is throttle, and the limitation is 500 call per 5 minutes per user, and also limitation per 24 hours, which depend on the license, 2,000 for the Office 365 license and more if you have a premium. So these are important to know if you create enterprise application. Make your code reusable. How can you reuse code? That's easy. Loops, a flow call another flow, or custom connector. Custom connector require premium. Master approval. You cannot create enterprise application if you don't master approval. So first, there is a 30-day limitation. In many cases, an approval does not take more than 30 days. In this case, well, you can write your flow, just use the start and wait for an approval, for instance, and that's it. Sometimes there is a risk that you can go beyond 30 days. Then what I recommend is, that's the easy way, is to have a parallel branch, the scope here, and in the scope you will count if you don't reach 30 days. So for instance, at 28 days, then at 28 days, you will notify that the approval is about to expire, 28 days. So you can notify the supervisor or whatever you call it. So that's an easy pattern. Now, the problem is, in some case, it's not enough. And in some case, you want to reuse code. You want to reuse code. So you need a state machine. Example of state machine, I always take the same. A user publish a legal document. And before the document be published, it will have to go through different states. First, an advisor, group of people, will validate the content. If it's approved, then a secretary office will validate the style. And then a boss will validate the final document. So this is easy to implement with Power Automate. The thing is, if people reject, you need to get back to previous action. That's why we need a state machine. Even worse, boss can redirect to secretary, to advisor, to publisher. So that's not easy to implement in Power Automate. Let me take an example. A user submit a travel expense. So an employee submit a travel expense. When it's submitted, it needs to be approved by a first line manager. And if the line manager doesn't approve on time, then it will escalate to another manager that I call the big boss. And if the big boss does not react on time, then the system will ask the big boss again and again. So to do that, and that's why I proposed what I've called a controller pattern, which is this. You have to split the flow, and the flow call another flow. So basically, when you create a new expense somewhere, you have a flow that will start. I call that the launcher flow. That's easy. And then the launcher flow will call a flow for the line manager to approve. And then it will call another flow for the big boss to approve. So we have one flow for each approver. You can make them generic enough to have only one flow for the approvers. But you need a guy in the middle, and the guy in the middle is the controller. So the launcher flow will call a controller. Controller will redirect the call to line manager. These are stateless flow. That means the controller call line manager and the controller stop running. Line manager will ask the line manager to approve, and then the system can send a message back to controller, approve, reject, and timeout. So line manager will start an instance of controller. Controller knows that if it's in timeout, that controller will redirect to big boss. Same story, big boss and timeout, approve, reject it, and the system controller will call the big boss again and again. So with this, you can go beyond 30 days and you have a reusability. So you can achieve state machine without any limitation. Or can you have a flow that call a flow? There are different ways to achieve that. So the first way is to have the user HTTP action and to have a flow that run as a web service. And the problem is this require premium. When flow started, it was standard. And then I've implemented this pattern with a database. So just put a message in the database that trigger another flow. So the database was SQL Azure. Then it became premium. And then I implement by using the service bus, putting messages somewhere, service bus, and then it become premium. I didn't take that personally. So I implement the same pattern with messages in the SharePoint list, and that works very, very well. And it does not require premium. It will always be standard. You can use run a child flow, but there are some limitation with run a child flow, which is it cannot run asynchronously, and it cannot do what we call it call and forget, which is actually what we need for the controller pattern. Also, what I've learned in approval is you have to be very careful with notification, because let's say we have the following pattern. User 1 approve, okay? And then the approval go to user 2. User 2 approved with or without comment. Well, actually, user 1 need to be notified that user 1 approved or approved with comment. If there are comment, user 1 need to get this comment in a way or another. User 2 approve, it goes to user 3, user 3 approve or put a comment. Same story. That means user 3 need to notify user 2 and need to notify user 1. So most companies want that. So you need to manage notification early in your project. Also, what I've learned is you need to define a role. I call that the BPM role, which is in charge of BPM monitoring. So that means you need to log everything. When someone approve or put a comment, log that somewhere. The BPM role must be able to monitor what's happened in the process. The BPM role must be able to cancel an approval, to cancel a flow, to cancel a whole process. And of course, the BPM role need to be notified when something new starts. There is a new approval, for instance. Okay, also important to be able to visualize your approval in a live way. One of the first things we did, and we use Power BI to do so, is to describe in Power BI the flow of, well, flow is not a good term, but the follow-up of this approval. It has been approved, submitted by this guy, and then it has been submitted to this guy, and then to this guy, and finally it has been approved, and we have a timeline here. So that works very nice. We did it for a customer 2 years ago. But then other customer want something different. They want to be able to get this. So this, I did it with Power Apps. So you can see the state of your approval. So you see, for instance, the flow is waiting here, or something like this, for instance, or something like this. This guy has canceled. So then the whole flow is canceled. The whole approval is canceled. Or something like this. We also did it for a customer. This expense went to this guy, and then it went to this manager. We ask 3 times escalation, and you can follow the different steps here. Okay. Let's go quickly to the demo, and I will go to this site. Oh, yeah. I want to hide this toolbar. does not want to be hidden, then I will do this. So let's go to this SharePoint site. It's a SharePoint site. That's where I manage all the expenses. It's a portal in Power BI, written in Power BI. We put an expense here and then a flow start. You can see the different status of the flow. Okay. And then the flow that starts is this one when a new expense is created in the SharePoint list. And what the flow will do is the flow will call a controller, will pass information about the approval itself. And then this is the flow for the line manager. Okay, so I have a try and a catch, like in every flow. I ask the line manager to approve. You can see if I start from the beginning that this is a web service flow. So it's called by another flow. And what I do is this. I post an adaptive card as a flow boat to a channel. So when there is a new expense, so that the procurement team can take a decision. I won't show the adaptive card because Thomas showed adaptive card before. I also create approval here. I do that in two steps, create approval and wait for approval. The benefit of doing that is when you use this in two steps, this generates an adaptive card and you can brand the adaptive card. So I brand the adaptive card here and then I post that as a flowbot to a user. So if I switch to the user, let's go to the user. User is, I have many user here. Raise. Yeah. So this is the user. The user get this. The approval has been branded. So you can fully brand your approval. Contoso, even the button can be branded if you want. They can click on approve or reject. Okay. And when they click, then they get something like this. Okay. It has been approved. Okay. So that's the benefit of you doing that in two steps. So you brand approval, and then two possibilities. Either the line manager react on time, we go there, or it didn't react on time. We use the error handling mechanism of Power Automate, which is here configure run after we have a timeout in this guy here. Okay. And if he react on time, then I will call the controller and say it's done. And the controller will stop the whole process. If it didn't react on time, then I will call the controller and say, hey, it's a timeout. So I send a message timeout. Okay, so timeout. And the controller knows that, oh, he has to call the boss and then again and again and again. So that's basically all the controller pattern works. If you want to know more about the controller pattern, you can follow the flow, the Power Automate in a day material, because I did create a lab. That's the last lab, just to explain how that works. Okay. Yeah. Also, I also want to show something, which is this. What I did for a customer is this. So when you click on, for instance, one expense, Singapore, let's go to Singapore, you can follow the whole approval process in Singapore. Okay, you can see that it has been, we asked Serge Luca to approve, and then it did approve because it's in green. There is an icon here which shows that it put a comment, which is nice. Then it went to user one. Okay, you can have more details about what user one did. And then the flow is waiting on user two. If you want, you can skip these steps, go to user three, or reassign to someone else, or stop the workflow. So now let's say it's waiting for user two. So I'm going to go to user two. And it's this one I started on Friday. So let's say approve, user two approve. It's like an adaptive card. It's an actionable message. Normally live, I don't touch anything. After a few seconds, you will see that the approver will go to user three. Might be wrong because, yeah. So now user three is gonna be waiting. Okay, I need maybe to refresh a bit. Yeah, user three is waiting now. Okay, and then now I can skip this step or reassign. That's what customer wants. So you can easily create that from scratch by using Power Apps. So use AI when it makes sense, of course. this is one of the use cases that my customer came with, same flow, but they asked me, hey, your flow generates too many messages. Could you minimize the number of human approval? So what I've done is, in my controller pattern, I've added a new branch. I've called that virtual boss. So basically here, I asked the machine learning to approve based on previous approval. And the machine learning can say it's approved, it's rejected, or I don't know, send the same message. So the controller pattern is so flexible that you can change it if you want. So what I've done is I've created an Azure ML schema, and I've trained my model in Azure ML with the previous data, and then I have a web service called by my flow. But now there is a new feature, which is the AI builder. So you can create an entity. I've called it virtual boss, and you can define your value here in virtual boss, and then the AI builder can guess, can make a prediction about if your value that you submit will be approved or not. Okay, so that's a bit beyond the scope of this session, but it works very, very well. So AI builder instead of machine learning. For my customer, we did machine learning. So also some Power Automate to Power Apps patterns that are very, very important and a bit confusing for many people. So let's say we have this scenario. Alex is calling a Power Apps application. The Power Apps application call a flow, and the flow has been created, deployed, and configured with an account. Let's call that the flow service account or whatever you want. So, and the flow access a SharePoint list. So the question is, who's accessing the SharePoint list, Alex or the service account? So most people say, not all, of course, but most people say it's a flow service account. Actually, it's not a flow, it's Alex, because by default with Power Apps, the user identity is transmitted to the flow. Okay, that's how it works. And actually, that's very safe. The problem is you need to manage Alex permission. And sometimes you want your flow to do something that the end user cannot do because your flow might need to go to some hidden list somewhere to increment the counter and do something nitty-gritty, right? So how can you do that? How can you have some kind of elevation privilege? The solution, there are two patterns. The first one, which is my favorite, is this one. Same story. So Alex call a Power Apps that call a flow that with a service account. And the idea is call another flow, run a child flow. And of course, the other flow must have the service account as the maker, or more specifically for the connection, because you can have an account for the maker and an account for another connection. What matters is the connection, of course. So you call another flow, and this flow can access the SharePoint list. That means that it's not Alex that will access the SharePoint list, it's the service account. When you go through another flow, you lose the original user identity, which is great. It is an elevation privilege. In many cases, it can save your life. Okay. Also, let's say now this flow access or use a premium connectors here. So this is a child flow, and now your flow will access a premium connector. Well, technically, you just need a premium license for this flow, not for this one. That's technically. Legally, you need to buy premium license for everyone. Everyone, but there is a bargain. The bargain is you can buy a per flow license. So the per flow license covers the whole company for premium license. Okay, up to 5 flow. If you want to create more flow, it's $100 per flow. So that's a very important licensing option, the per flow license, cover the whole company. So you are covered if you buy the $500 per flow license. I think that's very nice. Initially, when they provide this flow license, I didn't see the benefit of it. Now I see more and more. The second pattern is this one. Before called Chai Flow was provided by Microsoft, we could do this. This flow called by Power Apps put a message somewhere in the SharePoint list that trigger another flow. Okay, and of course this other flow, well, it's not directly called from Alex, so it ran with the flow service account identity. Same story. It could access premium without having to pay premium for every end user, but legally you are supposed to buy a per flow license. Of course, if you have a per app license, that works as well, but then you have to buy a per app license for every user, which could be too much for your customer. Conclusion. Well, we can spend one additional hour on talking about enterprise feature that matters. So there are many things to talk about. There is more than that. So I recommend you to learn UI flow, to learn, of course, adaptive cards, and I'm sure Thomas will agree with me. Regarding adaptive card, make sure that if you use adaptive card in Outlook, because in Outlook is not really adaptive card, as Thomas mentioned, but make sure that you have Outlook online, because Outlook on-prem does not support the actionable message. Also, learn Power Virtual Agent in any Power Platform project. I mean, your customer probably need virtual agent. Regarding UI flow, I have to work on a project that require UI flow. One of my customers want to implement HR process, but they have a legacy Oracle, so PeopleSoft human resource application. So what will be done in the Power Platform need to be copied back to PeopleSoft. So we will have to use UI flow. Power App Portal is very interesting as well. The CDS, my God, the CDS, that's so nice. I mean, if you have complex security permission, security scenario, some team can see some part of the data, other team cannot see. If they are in another country, they need to be able to some things. If you want scalability, if you have security issues, then you need common data service. Of course, you have to pay premium license. Microsoft Forms, Azure Function, if you want to create enterprise application. If you want your application to integrate with existing enterprise process, you can rely on Service Bus or the Azure Event Grid. Azure API management is also very interesting, especially if you want to get inside the custom connectors, or if you want to hide your flow that can start as a web service. SQL Azure is, of course, very important, but to be honest, I use more and more the common data service in my project. So that was a quick tour, a very quick tour of enterprise feature that you need in the real world. And I think now we can move to the question.
Yes, for sure. Thanks a lot, Serge. I see a lot of questions already. There was one about how to use Azure telemetry in Power Automate. So you talked a little bit about the Azure application insights, I believe,
Yes.
around Power Apps it was.
Yes. Or Automate, indeed. I think I have to double check. I think there is a application insight. There might be a connector, but what I do is this. I use the HTTP action, and I call directly the. Let me show you that. I think it's maybe manage error. I call the Azure Application Insight API, so Azure API, which is very easy.
Yeah.
Maybe here, terminate. Yes, let's take a look at that. So here, HTTP. So I call the Azure Application Insight.
Yeah.
I think. Oh no, sorry. In this case, I call an Azure function that call Azure Application Insight.
Okay, so you made an Azure function for that, yeah.
But in my mind, you might have a premium license for, or a premium connector for Azure Application Insight. I have to check. I have to check. That's how I did in the past, because.
Okay, let me see. There was another question. Lots of good comments, actually. Do you recommend using flow state transitions in combination with status recent transitions in CDS?
I don't know. To be honest, I don't have any experience in state machine because that's basically the question, and CDS. So I don't have any experience with that. What I do is I create my own state machine. And one of the reasons is that many of my customers cannot afford a premium for everyone. So that's the reason why I create my own state machine. So I cannot answer this one. So for sure.
Yeah, and you usually build also the flows for the whole company, right? You do,
Yeah, for the whole company, yes.
yeah. So
For the
that's
yeah, usually it's for
yeah.
the whole company. Indeed, it's used by 1,000 people. So the price of CDS, and which is really annoying because in some case, some part of the application are used only once a year or twice a year. But they have to pay the whole premium every month. So
Yeah.
that means the premium license will probably change in the coming years because there are some scenario that don't make sense. I think the team is fully aware of that. Yes.
Let me see if there is another question. I believe I've had them all. There's lots of comments. Great presentation, Serge. Amazing presentation. Thanks a lot. There's enough there. So a
Okay.
lot of good good comments. So yeah.
We still have a couple of minutes.
Yeah. So if there are some questions, please unmute yourself or ask them in the chat.
Okay.
Dr. Flo has some time now, so
Yeah.
better make use of it.
Take it. Take it.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a question. So I take it the sort of the approval status thingy was a Power App. So
Yes.
the green and yellow and gray and those
Yes.
statuses.
Yes.
Which component flow do you fetch to to check the status of the approval?
Okay. Okay. So basically, what I do is this. I used to. In this case, this implementation is in SharePoint, but I have another implementation in another storage mechanism. But what I do is this. I use two list approval. I call this one approval trace. Yes. So I have one is approval trace, and one is workflow trace. So when a workflow starts, each workflow instance has a dedicated GUID. Let's call it like this. And in the approval trace, each approval has another GUID as well. So for instance, in my approval trace, I have the workflow GUID and I have the step number. So I have a column called step number. You can see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. See? And I have a flow that, so anytime there is a change in this list, there is a flow which is notified about the steps. And the Power App, by the way, the Power App always read this list for getting the steps. You see? So if someone approve, that's what I did live previously, someone approve, that means the flow will go to the next step, will change something in the approval list, and the Power App will be refreshed. There is a refresh timer in this app actually that reads the data all the time, filter on the on the workflow, of course. You see? Maybe can I show you the code if you want? Yes. Okay, let's go there. I think it's in this environment. It's in the solution. It's a bit slow. We still have a couple of minutes, yes. I think it should be here. Demo, I think, yes. Let me show you this flow. Boom, 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 boom. It should be this one. No, it's not this one. I'm not sure I'm the correct tenant. But anyway, if you want, I will share that because my goal was to share this example. So basically, anytime someone approves, the information is stored in the SharePoint list, and the list is always read by the Power Apps. So in these Power Apps, there is a timer that refresh every 15 seconds so that we can have something live. And if you want to stop the flow, we click here, and then some information will be stored in a SharePoint list, and the flow will be notified that the flow, well, the workflow, but there is a difference between the flow and the workflow. The whole workflow is stopped, and then the system will put it in stop mode. You see? So it's just writing information in SharePoint list, reading information in SharePoint list. It's actually very easy. So probably that in the next Power Automate in a day, there will be a lab that illustrates how to do this kind of thing. My goal is to have something very generic. So it's still a proof of concept, but I want to make that very, very generic in such a way that if I want to apply that for a customer, I can do that very, very easily.
Okay.
I love it. Thanks, man. That's brilliant.
Yeah, there was another question.
Yes.
And that was about learning resources. Do you have options outside of Microsoft documentation?
Well, like everybody, I spend a lot of time with by reading community blogs. So that's the community is my inspiration. So I have to say thank you to the whole community because that's where most information comes. So yeah, we learn a lot from community.
Mm-hmm.
And also by sending questions to the product group, but I won't give you too much information about that. But no, the community is really the key for learning something.
Yeah. Okay. I think we can. Oh, another one. Yeah, the sessions are recorded and they will be added to YouTube. So we'll share the link as well.
Okay.
So that's good. Thanks a lot, Serge.
Thank you.
It was a great session and everybody loved it. So yeah, thanks a lot.